don't say I didn't try to warn you. It appears that over the weekend, thousands have been killed in Syria, hundreds of civilians. This is the aftermath of the fall of Assad, the overthrow of Assad, if we want to be legit about this. This is the aftermath of regime change that I tried to warn you about when this was taking place. We're going to go ahead and get started with this clip here, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, this is happening in Syria. There appears to be a possible current genocide in the making. Listen to this.
Syria's interim leader is calling for national unity after days of clashes and revenge killings in areas traditionally loyal to the ousted President Bashar al-Assad. Ahmed al-Sharaa described the violence in coastal regions as an expected challenge, while a British-based war monitoring organisation says that more than 1,000 people have been killed over the past few days, most of them civilians who were shot dead by security forces. Now, they're trying to crush an armed rebellion in the province of Latakia, the heartland of Syria's Alawite minority, and a base of support from the former President Bashar al-Assad.
Pause here for a second. Notice how they're describing this. This is really important why you need independent media. To make a long story short, Jolani's forces are basically trying to eliminate the people who were still there under Assad's regime. This was a no-brainer. A number of people were so excited and so happy after the overthrow of Assad. And there were some of us on the anti-imperialist left that were trying to warn you that this is just another regime change. And we know what happens when there are regime change wars. Who wins from this? Who benefits from this? That would be the West. That would be the U.S. government. That would also be Israel. They stand to benefit from it. And what you have seen since that overthrow of Assad was Israel moving full speed in to Syria to expand their idea of the Greater Israel Project. There was no win for this. And I warned you that the people who were there, and as much as people have complained and they said, look at what happened to them under Assad, I have tried to forewarn people over and over again that when you have these regime changes, when you have an overthrow of government, the people who are there, who were there prior to that overthrow, these people are worse off after the regime change than they were before. Now you see that Jolani, and this didn't take that long, now you see that Jolani and his forces are now trying to kill the people who were there under Assad and don't want an overthrow of government. This is not the first time. This has happened over and over again. Now you have more civilians that are losing their lives because of this. And for those of you who, if you are religious, a number of Christians are being killed because of this. People have to really pay attention to the end game goal here. Yes, Assad is gone. And now his people are being killed. This is complete chaos that is happening right now in Syria, in the Middle East altogether.
Was deposed and fled the country in December. Well, our correspondent Lena Sinjab has more from Damascus.
Unfortunately, the number of the civilians killed over the past 2 days have risen to over 700 civilians from the Alawites community. I've spoken to people in the city of Banyas who assured me that now the official security forces have entered the cities and provided safe corridors for people to go to safe areas. All the testimonies that we've heard is that factions affiliated with with the official authorities have conducted the killing. Many of them were also foreign fighters. Some are Chechens, and now the official security forces, the defense ministry, have blocked the highways leading to coastal cities to maintain calm. There are reports that some of the bodies today are being retrieved for burial, but there is a huge anger among people for this killing. The Alawites are scared because of what's happening, and the wider community in Syria are rejecting this kind of killing on base of religion in revenge way. They're saying that the revolution they went out for, it is not represented by these kind of practices that are similar to Assad regime's practices on many Syrians. And they're calling on the government not only to prevent this, but to hold those who perpetrated the killing accountable and bring them to justice.
So what people have to understand is this. This is complete chaos right now. Imagine if a force came into your community just rolling down the street in tanks and they say, we're in charge now. Overthrow your city council, overthrow your mayor and say, we're in charge. How would you feel? Would you feel safe if you opened up your front door and you saw tanks rolling down your street? Would you feel safe knowing that you may have difficulty trying to practice your religion? This is what people in Syria are facing right now. People have to understand what's happening in Damascus. This is not okay. You have to understand that this directly serves and benefits the U.S. government and Israel. And for all the people who were cheering this on at the time and said, yay, yay, this is going to be great. A number of them right now on social media are saying, oh my gosh, it's happening again. We tried to warn you. Nothing good comes from the West overthrowing a government. Nothing good. These people are basically held hostage or they're being killed. And don't forget this overthrow. This wasn't that long ago. I believe the overthrow was in December. It's now March. Look how quickly they are moving in. They're killing civilians, guys. They're killing civilians. How is that any different from killing civilians in Gaza? So if you stood up for the Palestinian people, you can't just sit back here and say, oh, well, this is just a casualty of war. No, this is a complete overthrow. They want the people gone. It's get in line and follow the new government or you're out of here. That's what they're facing right now.
Lena, it's worth just reminding ourselves that who the Alawite community are, because, of course, this is a region which is described as a stronghold of the Alawites. And, of course, the Alawites are the religious grouping that the deposed President Bashar al-Assad comes from. So there's a lot of tension when it comes to what is happening, given that Assad has now been deposed and is currently in Russia.
Well, the Alawite community are offshore of Shiite, and former President Assad is from the Alawite community, and many of the members of the Alawite community have taken part in atrocities on Syria, on Syrians. Many are blamed for the killing, torture in prison, and are representative of the security apparatus. However,
does that sound familiar? Well, the Alawites here are to blame because they were a part of these atrocities against the Syrian people. Doesn't that sound similar to what the media said about Hamas? Well, Hamas is to blame to what's happening to the civilians in Gaza because of their activity. These people do not want to be occupied. These people do not want to be oppressed. Why does the West get to come in and determine what's going to happen in another country and just take over and occupy their people? Yes, they are of a different religion. That is another thing. So if you consider yourself to be pro freedom of religion, you should also have a problem with this. And yet we saw a number of the people that are primarily, especially neoliberals, they were cheering on the overthrow of a leader only to have to come back and say, whoa, this is not what we were asking for. What did you think would happen? How did things work out when the U.S. overthrew Gaddafi? What about when they overthrew Saddam Hussein? Why did you think that this would be any different? What would make you think that? What would make you believe that life would be better and improved for the people here when history has repeatedly showed us that is not the case? A lot of people fell for it.
The community have nothing to do with any of the killing. In fact, many of the ones who were killed over the past 2 days already opposed Assad's power. But on Thursday, remnants of the Assad regime came out and said that they formed a rebellion against the current authorities. They've ambushed security forces, killing dozens of them, which called for retaliation and, by some members of the factions who are affiliated with the current authorities. Now, the wider mood inside Syria is to call for a Syria that represents all the community, regardless of their background or religion, and that there shouldn't be any revenge killing. However, those who have blood on their hands from the Assad regime should be brought to justice. And now there are big calls now for those who have blood on their hands that were affiliated with the authorities should also be brought to justice.
Syria's
So another puppet of the West here, right? So those people should be brought to justice, but not the people from Jelani's crew, right? Jelani's crew shouldn't be brought to justice while they're killing civilians. Look at this. Hundreds of civilians have been killed in Syria. More than 1,300 people have been killed in an eruption of violence in Lakia and Tartus in the last 72 hours. Didn't I warn you this was going to be an issue? This was going to come? Hundreds of civilians have been killed in Syria in the last 48 hours, the deadliest eruption of violence since the fall of Assad's regime. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reports that at least 830 civilians have been killed in what is described as the largest collective act of revenge in the coast and its mountains. More than 1,300 people have been killed in 72 hours. And if you want to know, again, who really benefits from this, listen to something that Rachel Blevins said. I thought this was a spot on here. Rachel Blevins, journalist. Listen to this.
If you want to see who is benefiting from HTS, now Al-Qaeda, ruling in Damascus, then just look at the responses from the individual countries that were so involved in the overthrow of Assad. We already had the US, and yes, I know it's a little bit different now that you have the Trump administration, although arguably Trump was still involved in the efforts to try to overthrow Assad, given the fact that he still maintained a US troop presence in Syria. He was very open about the fact that the US and its military were there to steal Syria's natural resources, such as the country's oil. And then on top of that, he also served to increase tensions in the region instead of de-escalating them. So you have the US with its statement, but it doesn't stop there, because you also had the EU's diplomatic service, led by Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, which said in a statement, quote, "The European Union strongly condemns the recent attacks reportedly by pro-Assad elements on interim government forces in the coastal areas of Syria and all violence against civilians."
So you see who really benefits from this, right? Obviously, the European Union, like the West is the benefactor here.
So they're actually openly trying to claim that all of the violence, the killing of civilians, is being carried out by these quote unquote pro-Assad loyalists, even though they're targeting the community that Assad represented. Yet that is not remotely true. And literally, if you go and read, and I'll leave the link to that post, but if you go and read all of the, a good portion of the comments, I'll say below, as well as the community notes, they are calling them out left and right because they are completely inaccurate. And they're not even playing the game that most in the Western media are, where they go, oh, well, you know, there were some clashes between the two sides, and then it just got out of control, and now there's hundreds of revenge killings, and we don't know what to tell you.
And that's another thing I've noticed as well. If you look at a lot of the reports from the West, they're just like, oh, we don't know where these attacks really came from. Just clashes on both sides. It sounds familiar, right? Because again, you have to remember, corporate media is a mouthpiece for imperialism. Corporate media is a mouthpiece for war, and they have been for years. Now, I tried to warn people about this, over and over again, that this was going to be a problem. that this was going to be a problem. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up here. X has been difficult today for whatever reason. And we don't know why. But I was going to try to show you the pictures of some of the people that are now gone, but it appears that X is having problems again. So I apologize for that. But ladies and gentlemen, again, as I said before, nothing good comes from regime change wars. Nothing good comes from regime change wars. Nothing good comes from overthrowing leaders. The only people who benefit from that is the West. So now we have more death, more killing in Syria. The Middle East is a wreck. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.